Oh, here's David Katz.
Yay!
Jeez. David. My God. This is a courtroom. I would cite you for showing up to the trial late. How dare you? But I crave the information that David Katz has so much that I wouldn't dare. So, all right, how about it? So, Kim, we'll put your news on ice, and we'll talk to the great David Katz.
The Mark Thompson Show.
He's a former federal prosecutor, and his analysis is featured on London radio, on television from New York to Los Angeles to San Francisco. He's the great David Katz, everyone.
Great
Hello,
to
sir.
be with you guys. You know, traffic still doesn't get out of my way, so I'm terribly sorry. I was coming over one of our canyons in LA, and it was just impossible. And once you're there, there's no detour, right? It's just you sit there and you get there when you get there. So sorry about that. Sorry to your listeners, but let's do it. There's some interesting news today.
Can I start?
Trump just took the stand.
Right. Trump just took the stand. Now, what do you make of that?
Well, I don't think that it was very effective. He was on the stand for 4 minutes. The judge made clear to him, Mark, that he shouldn't go, give a campaign speech or, denigrate the court or the witness. So basically, all he said under questioning from his lawyers was, do you stand by what you said in your deposition? Of course, he was very ineffective in his deposition, but I felt they had to ask him that question. So he said, yes, I stand by my deposition. And then he said, did you intend to harm Miss E. Jean Carroll? And he said no. And then he was off within 4 minutes. I guess they figured there was really nothing to be gained in a lot of cross-examination of him, which, of course, E. Jean Carroll's side could have engaged in. But I think this is only about damages, Mark. And right. I think that they're on their way to a judgment. This time, it was $5 million before. I think it'll be about $10 million this time. But it could be even more because, he's not getting the message. And that's what they're going to argue to the jury. He didn't get the message from a $5 million verdict, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. He went right out not right out, but, he did this as president. He defamed her, and the damage is incalculable. The damage is forever to be defamed by the president the way that she was. She's
and then he did almost go right out after the last judgment. So I think you're not. I think you're right about that. I mean, he said this never happened. She's made this up. He kind of it reverted to the mean or whatever. He went back to his original story. David, I want to ask you about recovering. I have two questions. I'll get to the money in a second, recovering that money, getting that judgment. But before I do, I want to go to his testimony. When he says, or when anyone says, hey, it wasn't my intent to damage her reputation or whatever, which kind of, as you suggested, was what he said, is that a defense?
Well, it certainly would be to damages, right? This trial is only about damages. And so how much money he ought to pay her, I mean, yes, I think the jury would take into account that while she was damaged a certain amount, he didn't really mean to intend it, because there's a punitive damages, Mark, element to this. And so certainly in considering punitive damages, you want to consider the mindset and the intent. But, it wasn't like he suddenly blurted this out, Mark. This was something he said as the president. He said it, I think, in the setting of having that great seal of the United States in front of him. He's got loads and loads of advisors. They apparently told him, you can go about this far. You can say, I deny her claims. He didn't go as far as the lawyers said, you can deny her claims. I mean, that's something, if you're a senator, if you're the president, somebody makes allegations against you, that's under the law, you can say, I deny their claims.
You can wait a minute, David. You can say that after the judgments come in that is against you. You can say that still.
This is people always have questions about this case because it's very complicated. First, he sexually assaults her. That's what happened in the Bergdorf Goodman's dressing room over there in New York City.
And the court ruled that happened. Yes.
The jury found that happened by the standard for a civil case. I think all the jurors were in agreement. I'm not sure if they have to be in New York civil cases, but they were either all in agreement or they were whatever percentage they had to be, so that this is a perfectly fine judgment against him. When she files that case against him, which is the sexual assault, that's when he defames her. Because as president, he holds a press conference and he said, I had the right to defend myself. And it's true, under the law, Mark, he had a right to say, I deny her charges. He went on to insult her during that presidential press conference, say she wasn't my type, and do other things which took it out of that privilege that a president or senator or elected representative has to say to defend their reputation with their voters and in their office, to say, I deny these sexual assault, rape claims that have been made against me. So he litigated that issue, Mark, through the courts. And so that case wasn't ready to go to trial until it got litigated, whether what he'd done was in the scope of his presidential privilege to say, I deny the sexual assault and rape charges against me, or whether he went beyond that. The court said he went beyond that, and therefore he was liable to suit. So that suit went to the same judge that had the E. Jean Carroll sexual assault and rape charge, because it was a related case. That judge knew a lot about it. That's Judge Kaplan in the Southern District of New York. So this is the second trial. But this trial is only about damages, because the judge said that having proven that she'd been sexually assaulted, that the claim, I did not do it, she's lying, she's not even my type, she's making all this up, this is all a big hoax. Since that was beyond any privilege that he had, they're now going to try the damages on that second instance. On top of that, after the first trial with the sexual assault, he went on CNN, I think it was, or some major national outlet, and said, this is all a hoax, this is all a witch hunt, I didn't do this. That will be yet a third trial, whether that was defamation. And the argument right now for damages is going to be, let's look, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, at that whole course of conduct. This is an incorrigible person, Trump, who keeps blasting me, who keeps defaming me. And if you don't make a really painful amount of money, he's going to go right out after this case and defame me again. He hasn't gotten the message. Give him a message loud and clear. Give him punitive damages. And that's the one where if the jury feels that way, and there's good reason why they might feel that way, they could come back with a truly mind-blowing amount. They could come back with 20, 25 million. At some point, there is Supreme Court doctrine that the punitive damages can't be huge. You know, they can't be the dog, the case is the tail, and the whole dog is the, you know,
Sure.
25, 50, you know, pick a number, $100 million. If they came back with $100 million, probably the courts would throw that out as excessive. But I think they could come back not with the 10 or 12, but they could come back with 20 as punitive damages. And so to that extent, Trump feels that getting up there, trying to be as likable as he can be for 4 minutes, not ranting and raving in front of the jury this time, I think his lawyers have told him, look, you know, it might be worth millions of dollars to you to make a 4 minute long good impression if that's what he ends up making with the jury. There's people who say it makes a terrible impression. But I would think on balance, being his lawyer, Mark, I probably would have trotted him in there for those 4 minutes. I think that he probably helped himself a little bit on the punitive damages with the jury.
Now, about that money, how do you recover that money? How do you get that money from this judgment? I mean, he's notorious for stiffing lawyers, contractors, everyone. I mean, you just line up. I mean, how does the court, in their judgment, make it clear you've got to cut a check to this person?
Well, first of all, if you want to appeal, you have to post a check, which is about, or a bond, which is the amount of the judgment. So he actually he was going to post a bond. I think this is what happened, and they charge you an amount to post a bond. So let's say if you have to post a $5 million bond. Remember, he already lost a judgment to her of $5 million in the first suit, where the jury found that he had sexually assaulted her in that dressing room. So I think they charge a premium. Let's say it's 20%. So instead of taking $1 million out of your pocket for the premium, I understand that Trump put up real money. So to save the premium, Trump put up real money. And I think that's because it's pretty clear he's going to lose this case. And he figures, you know what, better pay her the amount than to pay her the amount plus the premium when he ends up losing it in the appeals court. Because remember this, if Trump doesn't get elected president, and with all this hoop-de-doo with Haley, and, you know, he won Iowa and he won New Hampshire, to me, he's a total loser. I predict right here he's going to lose. He's going to get the nomination. He's going to lose to Biden. And after January 2025, he's going to be finished, you know, politically. He'll have a little movement. He'll sell a lot of stuff. He'll still do the big hustle, right? But he's going to want to pay these people. He's going to want to get these suits behind him. So I think that E. Jean Carroll is going to get the $5 million. I think she's going to get a lot of the damages. And that's why I think he's got his eyes on the prize. Now, how do you actually collect if he fights? If he doesn't post the bond for, like, let's say this one comes back at $10 million. If he doesn't post the bond of $1 million or $2 million, or he doesn't post the money, then they start seizing stuff. And there's not, Mar-a-Lago, is supposed to be in Florida, kind of a very hard place to collect a judgment to execute on an award. But New York isn't. And there are some things that are in his name. And, it is perilous if you go and put everything in other people's names. Guess what? They may give you a hard time about putting it back in your name. And believe me, Trump, Trump the hustler, Trump the smart aleck, smart guy, he's figuring out, okay, what do I have to pay these people to get these cases off my back? Remember, Trump University, he did pay $25 million for that phony university that he had, and the people who got defrauded thinking they were getting real educational value, and they were getting flim-flammed.
That was $25 million. There's a lot of money on that judgment on the university you're talking about. So I do want to. This is fascinating, and it's weird because I really wanted to. It's just happening. It's the news of the moment, and you do draw out a pretty interesting argument for what might and maybe likely will happen to Donald Trump. The future, and I love the detail that you provided, and then I want to ask you about something that has nothing to do with Trump, but it's also really of the moment. The detail that you provided about the posting, that money that he has to post, the $5 million in this case, that was the first judgment. There'll be, I understand, millions more after that, because that's what we're talking about, the damages. That $5 million, does the plaintiff, does E. Jean Carroll have access to that money? Does she get it, or is it held in escrow somewhere?
I'm not exactly sure, but if you recall, there was a financial angel in this case. There was someone, he's connected with one of the media groups, like emerging media groups, and I forget which one it was, but that person was willing to post $10 million. So even if E. Jean Carroll never collects anything, and she's going to collect millions, her lawyers were going to get paid because someone was willing to, back that lawsuit with $10 million. And then obviously the money that they get, that financial angel will, I imagine, be compensated. But that's not, we've had some unusual things in these super high profile cases. It's not usual that someone will give you $10 million to go chase an award that, you might never get. I mean, it might turn out that Trump is so underwater, and, when he falls, the empire may fall behind him. The whole financial empire may be based on people wanting to buy influence from him, speculating on him being president again, and being able to, make a lot of favors. People may not want to stay in the hotels. I wouldn't take a meeting at the Trump Hotel. I don't care how much I wanted to meet the person. I just wouldn't go there. And there are millions and millions of people that he's really disparaged.
Yeah, you're saying once he loses the political shimmer, right, and the possibility of being able to do political favors, that's when he'll have too big a stink on him, and he's going to lose all of the support, or much of it. This is a good question. Why aren't, and I just was reporting on this at the beginning of the show because Peter Navarro got that judgment for 6 months in prison for denying the subpoena in the J6 congressional investigation. Why aren't the two people, Bannon and Navarro, staying in jail during their appeal, like many criminals have to?
Well, because they have substantial issues on appeal. And as a white-collar criminal defense attorney now, Mark, I'm a huge advocate. I want to say that I've got a dog in this hunt, because I always want my clients, if, God forbid they get convicted, and I try to not have them be convicted. I try to win the case or make some kind of deal where they don't go to prison. But if they do get a prison sentence, we criminal defense attorneys obviously want to have the client stay out on bail. And the argument is, the person's not a flight risk, and in a white-collar case, generally they're not a danger to the community or other people in any way, that, it's not very fair to win the appeal and already have served the time. As Alice in Wonderland might say, the service of the sentence first and the winning appeal later. That's Alice in Wonderland, right? What good does it do? You get a 18-month sentence, and 20 months later, after you served, the sentence, the Court of Appeals said, this was the search was improper, or the trial, you didn't have a fair trial. And, the winning an appeal a lot of times just means having a new trial. But it just tends to, in the real world, lead to better deals, the prosecutor taking a more reasonable view of the case if the case gets remanded by the appeals court for a new trial. So we want the client to stay out during that period of time. And
that's why in this case,
for someone like Navarro or Bannon, right?
I will get a I will get to this execution in a moment. But before I do, just because we're on Trump, I'd like to talk about what's happening to Fani Willis in Georgia. This is a total mess. So she is linked to a prosecutor, romantically linked. And you can fill out the important details here, but I'm wondering to what extent it affects it. It already has. They put I was going to say to what extent it affects the Trump cases. I think they put the case on hold, or at least on pause. Can you speak to this?
Well, the optics are terrible. Legally, it will delay the trial. I never thought the trial of Trump would happen before the election in November 2024. And now it looks just about certain that it won't. And if you make a credible claim that the prosecutor should be disqualified, generally they pause the case and they see if you're right or wrong, because if you have a credible claim, it's not just frivolous. And a lot of Trumps have been frivolous, attacking every prosecutor, attacking so many judges. But here he's got a fairly credible claim. And so it's going to delay the case. And at worst, it could really knock the whole case out. People are talking about the fact that Willis got knocked out of a case against some state office holder. He's now the lieutenant governor. And when she got knocked out of the case because she had apparently raised funds for his opponent, so she's raising funds for his opponent and she's also prosecuting him. He won the motion to disqualify her. And from that, there's supposed to be some board that picks a new prosecutor and the ball gets rolling. That ball has not gotten rolling in 18 months. So if you imagine there were the same delay in this case, talk about justice delayed is justice denied if this trial doesn't go before November 2024. But the allegations are interesting. Let me tell it first from her point of view. I think from her point of view, she found this wonderful prosecutor. She thought he or somebody that he would pick would be the person for the job. This person went around, this would-be special prosecutor. He kind of got the job a little bit like Cheney got to be vice president. Remember, they told Cheney, go find the perfect person. He came back and he said, it's me. I'm the perfect person. The search committee just found the right guy. It's me. It's Cheney, he told W. Anyway, this fellow was supposed to find the perfect prosecutor, and supposedly 3 or 4 people turned it down. Why? It wasn't enough money. It certainly wasn't enough money to go take on Trump and have him and his MAGA base be your enemies for the rest of your life. And you know the stuff that happens to some of these high-profile people who fight Trump, and they think, look, I'm a human being. Yes, in theory, a prosecutor should take this and have nerves of steel. But guess what? Me, my family, why don't you choose the next guy? So he actually had trouble, this person, finding the right prosecutor. So eventually he said, I'm willing to do it. And she says, you'd be fine. You have really good judgment. That's why I picked you. While that was happening, they ended up having a romantic interest in each other. He was getting divorced from his wife. I guess Willis was single. And so they started having this romantic relationship. And the answer would be, so I picked the perfect person. He was doing a great job. He made $250 an hour, which is not a scandalous rate. Most private attorneys charge quite a bit more than that. They'll say he wasn't that experienced. She'll say he had a lot of confidence in him. She'll say he's doing a very good job so far. He's gotten 4 guilty pleas. What more do you want from the guy? You can see that he's acted competently. And yes, we were both not with somebody. And so we got together romantically. And what's the big deal? That's going to be her story. I think at the end of the day, they have credit card slips showing that he paid for trips to places like the Caribbean, going to the Caribbean, going to beautiful San Francisco Bay. That seems like an odd place to be working on the prosecution together. So it looks like, something was going on there. And, they seem to have a background for that. And Trump is going to join that motion and try to get her knocked out. Trump's side of the story, of course, is going to be that this is the worst of prosecutorial abuse. This is, in a nutshell, everything that he suffered. These are the trumped up charges from Trump haters. And look at the corruption of these people, right? Their view of it's going to be she picked somebody who's basically inexperienced in this field because she's in love with him. He makes this huge amount of money, over $650,000. It's almost a motive to go after Trump and to cook this whole thing up as a way for this inexperienced lawyer to go make $650,000. And then on top of it, he spends money on her, taking her on these vacations. They're going to try to prove that he paid her share or her way on these vacations. And they're going to say, look, it's totally corrupt. And he should be thrown off the case. She should be off the case. And someone has suggested, it was an editorial in the New York Times just the other day, that in the interest of moving this case forward and in the interest of the appearance of justice, that she should take a leave of absence, that they should find another special prosecutor promptly to replace the $650,000 man. And just using people in the district attorney's office, they should move forward with the indictments that they have, move forward with the case without her having any involvement, with her having not just recused herself for having a Chinese wall from this case, but her taking a leave of absence from the office altogether. So she would have no even apparent power. She would be on a leave of absence. It probably means the end of her political career, though. She's running for district attorney again this year. If she does that, that's a profile in courage. That's a truly generous thing to do. Someone who really doesn't want to see Trump back in the presidency, I believe, would do that. I don't think it would help her political career. And then in terms of firing this prosecutor, whatever his talents may be, whatever his inexperience may be, there's other people in her office who could prosecute this case. So, but this is really one to watch, because this is
it's so bizarre to see the juxtaposition of Donald Trump, and this is a case in which he couldn't pardon himself. Or he couldn't be. This is a state case about messing with state elections. This is a sacrosanct thing, the election, and it had the staying power, and it just had the power associated with it being sacrosanct. And it's weird that Donald Trump, in typical fashion, doesn't have it now stick to him because of the prosecutor and the DA having these issues. It's utterly, I'm just talking about from a jetliner view of it. It's yet another way in which, in this movie, it's practically like a movie villain. He gets away, from this one in this bizarre fashion.
Mark, I so agree with what you're saying. And, this is how Trump rolls. I think it's fair to say that every time Trump was investigated for some crime, especially at the state level, there were always two investigations. One of it was Trump's, unrelenting investigation of the prosecutor. Supposedly, he wasn't prosecuted before all of this happened for his shenanigans down in Tribeca in New York. And that case would have involved one or more of his children for criminal fraud. But we now know in retrospect that he had something on the DA or on the attorney general who would have brought that case. That what he ended up having on that person came out later. But it was obvious to me, anyway, in my opinion, that Trump had it from the beginning. And it was like, okay, you want to destroy my life? Watch me destroy your life, because I have blackmail on you. And this didn't just come about. Someone didn't happen to see these two people, Willis and this special prosecutor, at the airport getting on a flight to the Caribbean and saying, oh, isn't that interesting? I saw the two of them on TV. No, come on, Mark. You know how this came about? An absolutely assiduous, pursuit by Trump's investigators of anybody who was going to go after him. And of course, Jack Smith, is Caesar's wife. I'm sure he's as clean as he can be. My old friend from the U.S. Attorney's Office, Adam Schiff, is as clean as he could be. What do you think they did to Adam Schiff? I don't know this. There's no inside information. But what do you think Trump and his minions did to Adam Schiff? They probably did everything. They looked everywhere they possibly could. And these people are truly clean in every sense. Schiff, the special
Smith.
Prosecutor.
Yeah.
But you sort of have to be. I mean,
but being both of them, Schiff and Smith, both, as you say, are being X-rayed on so many different levels, on a granular level. This is how it works, and that they're going to make whatever hay they can over even the smallest grain of whatever they can find. Assiduously is a ding word.
Let's go to Alabama and SCOTUS.
Yeah. Now, this is what I want to do now. The Supreme Court this has nothing to do with Trump. The Supreme Court has declined to halt the execution of this Alabama inmate. He's the first to be executed by nitrogen gas. Nitrogen gas is a gas that is naturally occurring in the environment, of course, but if you only are breathing natural nitrogen gas, then you're not breathing oxygen, and that suffocates you, okay? I mean, it's a weird, sad thing to have to speak of, but this guy is in prison for a murder for hire, okay? Now, the Supreme Court said, no, we're not going to intervene. Maybe you can tell us what and this is interesting because you're a defense attorney now, but you've also been a prosecutor. The defense is arguing, I guess, to keep him out of the chair. They were saying this can be cruel and unusual or painful or exceedingly painful, something like that, right, David?
Well, yes. And, this whole death penalty issue has always been fascinating. It's always gotten, it kind of grips us as human beings. And that's why this is what people talk about in law school. This is, while you're having a coffee, in law school, people have different views and bat this around. And then you just think of our, American idiom from, firing squad to electric chair to this fellow's spiritual advisor just said today that this was going to be a house of horrors. It's all full of these expressions about imposing the death penalty. And just to get the U.S. Supreme Court law clear, for a while, the U.S. Supreme Court did not allow executions as a practical matter. That was sort of something that happened kind of after the Warren Court. But the modern courts, the more modern courts, do allow the death penalty. If a state wants to impose the death penalty, the state can impose the death penalty. And, California, where you think it's unpopular, there was a referendum, and we have the death penalty. Governor Newsom has to have a moratorium, or else some of our cases would go to the death chamber. Some of the people on death row would actually get death. But for the governor's moratorium, even in liberal blue California, this is a really a controversial issue. And the southern states are known for not only having the death penalty, but imposing the death penalty. So Alabama, Mississippi, Oklahoma, Texas have a fair amount of death penalties that are imposed. And this fellow who, as you say, it's a murder for hire. You can't really go back and say, maybe this is one for the Innocence Project. It looks like, or, excessive punishment. Somebody had this hitman kill his wife. The wife was killed by this fellow who's on death row right now. The husband ended up committing suicide when the investigation turned to him. And then they found a video or something which shows this hitman somehow involved in the murder of the wife. So bad case on the facts. This fellow also has not 9 lives, but he's had at least 2 lives, because in a fascinating twist on this case, he actually went all the way through his appeals, his habeas petitions and everything. He had death imposed. He was getting the death penalty a year ago when they couldn't find a vein.
They literally were, and David's right. I mean, they literally were, into this guy. They just couldn't find it. Imagine that. It's bizarre. It's like something out of a movie.
And that's one of his issues that it's cruel and unusual punishment. Yes, the death penalty may be approved by the U.S. Supreme Court as not in and of itself cruel and unusual punishment, but to have it, to have this sort of second chance. And I think one of the reasons that the U.S. Supreme Court turned the case down and won't stop his execution, at least so far, in the ruling they made, I think it was just yesterday, it was unanimous. It was without much explanation. It was a denial without any dissents. And you could dissent. None of the justices dissented from it. And I think it's because we've been there. We've evaluated all of his claims a year ago.
Sure,
and we said he can get the death penalty. He just got whatever you want to call it. He had this sort of second life. So now he's back. So then he says, well, look, I want to have this oxygen. I want to have this nitrogen poison killing. I want to have that. Not what I had last time or anything else, because he thought they couldn't set up the protocol. There has to be a protocol and very well explained in a state policy, how you go about doing it. And like, here are the 20 steps. We're going to do this. We're going to do that thing. Alabama, once he said, I'm okay with this nitrogen thing. I mean, given that given that I'm going to be executed, this is the means by which I'm kind of okay with. So then Alabama, right?
He ordered the nitrogen off the execution menu. Is that what you're telling us?
It made a very fast protocol. So now they've complied with the protocol and they're ready to execute him in the next 24 hours. And he's gone to the circuit court too. But it looks like all of his claims will be denied. And, what he says is that, now that he's really thinking about it, looking at the protocol, he's liable to vomit. He'll vomit into the mask. It won't work just right. He'll end up being sort of worse than waterboarded. He'll be sort of tortured in this execution of him. Now he wants a firing squad.
Is that he's ordering off the menu now? Do they have a firing squad?
They won't give him any food. He doesn't wait. They're not going to give him a last meal. He's the first person maybe executed in American history who doesn't get a last meal.
That's right, because then you have the.
He's going to vomit in the mask. So that's it. So he's not getting a last meal, and he's a cat with at least 2 lives, and he's hoping to be spared. It doesn't look like any court's going to spare him, and it's just sort of like weird. The U.S. Supreme Court, this sort of second time being put to death, is that cruel and unusual punishment? On balance, like I said, these cases like that where it's a hitman who looks like that they have evidence on him. By the way, he did it for $1,000, Mark.
That's so
Talk
sick.
about life
So
being
sick.
cheap.
Yeah.
For $1,000, this woman is dead, and he's on death row. And if you go back, you read like In Cold Blood, you read something like that. Why is that so gripping? These stories are just really, really gripping. We can talk about how the U.S. Supreme Court is going to cut back on the administrative state, and we could talk about that for hours. But this is what grips people, and it's just human nature. I think that it grips.
Well, David asked in the chat, do they at least put the victim to sleep before they suffocate them? No. Well, the idea is that this will put you to sleep. The idea is that you're being suffocated, essentially. That's literally what's happening, because your body's not getting the oxygen it needs, and so you do go to sleep. And as we've just said,
Mark, Alabama says it works. Alabama's side of it is that it works very well, and it's used in Europe for assisted suicides, and it works fine in Europe. But it's the first time that it's ever been done in America, and so that also makes it unprecedented and makes the case just fascinating.
This is my audience, David. How about the guillotine? Quick, easy, positive reaction. Wow, that's grim.
Well, it's not fake. That's real. Day, sir.
Yeah, that is right. But
there are military provisions how you're put to death. It's sort of important in the law of war, and I think some people are entitled, or were in the old days, entitled to a firing squad. That sort of thing. It's symbolic too, how you're put to death, and it has meaning. It has meaning for people, even though at the end of all of them, you're dead.
Right, exactly. But I mean, the suffering associated with it and all the rest, as you say, that's all in the details. There are many people in the chat that are saying, I have tough to find veins also. The phlebotomist can't find it. No, the doctor can't find it. Well, everybody just stay out of the death chair, and you'll likely not have to. And boy, we haven't executed anyone. What were you saying, David, about, we have it here, but what the last time somebody was executed in California? It's been quite a while.
Someone down in San Diego not only killed somebody, but then he ate his fries. And for some reason, that was one of those things. Like I say, people have really strong emotions about all these kind of things. There's mercy, but there's also retribution, right? And if you stop and think about it for a minute, if it were a loved one, and then you can make it more aggravated. You can have a terrorist. Merrick Garland in the Department of Justice asked for the death penalty under Biden for this fellow on the. There's a walkway in New York City by the old World Trade Center, and somebody went down there and just a terrorist and killed a lot of people. He meant to kill them. He did kill them. He was unrepentant about it, and they asked for the death penalty on him. But the jury has to be unanimous, at least in the federal system, and the jury wasn't unanimous. The jury was not unanimous, so that person got life. And if you remember, this is a Bill Clinton story. Bill Clinton wanted to show when he was running for president in 1992 that he was tough on crime. He wasn't one of those, liberal, soft on crime Democrats. And he went back to Arkansas and supervised the imposition of the death penalty, the executions of 2 people who had a very low IQ. I'm not trying to bash Clinton, but it helped people reinforce the idea that, okay, he's not like Dukakis. He's not wringing his hands. He's not saying, oh, I don't know what I would do if someone killed and raped my wife. It was a way of graphically showing, I'm tough on crime. And so for some people, this really sort of is their views on whether they're tough on crime or not. There's other ways to be tough or supposedly soft on crime. Like in my kinds of cases, you see judges, we all have an idea with certain judges, whether they're tougher or not, on crime, on sentencing, on stuff like that. But when you come to the death penalty, it evokes so many different emotions, different positions. By the way, I've never asked for the death penalty when I was a prosecutor. I did have a first-degree murder case where I asked for life in prison against someone who, with deliberation and malice, murdered the postal carrier. And
wow.
she was on her route singing, and that's a federal crime because she was in the course of her federal duties. So I did ask for life
Wait a minute. I'm sorry. I was just about to wrap up, but now I'm going to warn our stations. We'll run a little bit late. Tell me, why did she kill the postal carrier?
It was a man who killed the postal carrier.
Okay.
He committed prior offenses, and it was
What
sort
was
of
the motive?
Well, it seemed like, as I recall the case, the motive was that he'd been dissed by the gangs. He wanted to show the gangs that he was a tough guy, so he was going to kill somebody. And the first person who came to his door was the friendly neighborhood female postal carrier, whistling while she worked. And there was one of those screen doors where she couldn't really see in, but he could see out from inside the house. And he blasted her right through the screen door. And then he shot her a second time, which helped me prove my premeditation. That if he didn't premeditate before, if he really thought it was a mistake, he thought it was some gangbanger coming to get him, why did he shoot the second time? And he had sort of a mental defense without a psychiatrist. In those days, this was sort of like the Twinkie defense. This was like the diminished capacity. But it must have been something wrong with him. Why would he have done that? There was sort of a psychiatric defense with no psychiatrist behind it. Yeah. And he was duly convicted in federal court, but I didn't ask for the death penalty. I've had one murder case where I was able to get my client cleared of the murder charges and just for lesser charges. I mean, he was running with the gang, but it was much lesser charges, and it wasn't that he was.
Look at you, the gang prosecutor and the gang defender. He's worked both sides of it, everybody. Yeah.
Tell you one last story. When the family came to me, I said, it's the Ventura County Sheriff's Department, and they said, you beat the FBI and the IRS. Why don't you take a crack at this case brought by the Ventura?
And this is as a defense. This is when David's a defense attorney.
This was as a criminal defense attorney, but that was not a death penalty case or what they call life with. Well, it was potentially a life without the possibility of parole.
You're saying that they came to you and you said that you fought the law and you won. Make it win for us.
Well, I fought the law and the law won, but they said to me when I sort of balked a little bit at taking the case. And I remember that I had this murder case when I was a federal prosecutor. So I worked with actually LAPD murder officials who, unlike what you heard in OJ, at least in my case, when I was a federal prosecutor, they were wonderful. The LAPD homicide detectives who worked that case. So, but she had that line that I always remembered. She said, look, if you could beat the FBI and the IRS, take a crack against the Ventura County Sheriff's Department.
Well, that's what I mean. I mean, you fought the law and you won over the law in those cases that she cited. So she knew who to get on the case, and it worked.
Thank you, Mark.
David, so glad that you can spend time with us. Thank you. I look forward to Thursdays to be able to dump all of these legal questions in front of you, and you help sort them all out. Look forward to
Mark, you're going to lift the sanctions, right? Because it was really a terrible drive there.
Yes, I accept your excuse, and you are completely forgiven. There he is, Katz, the great predictor, as depicted by one of our viewer listeners. That is David Katz as Nostradamus, and great stuff. Thank you, pal.
Will you have him draw me without my glasses, Mark?
Those are your credibility glasses. Come on. All right, we'll see if we can't get another one going. David Katz, everybody. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.